go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Budget Finance Committee meeting for February 8th, 2021. I'm Paul Krikorian, Chair of the committee, and we are ready to begin today's meeting. So let's start, if we can, Ms. Morales, by calling the roll, please.
Krikorian.
Here.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield present.
De Leon.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
Price. Mr. Price?
Here.
Thank you. 5 members present and at quorum, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you very much. Ms. Morales, if you could please read out the information regarding calling in for public comment for today's meeting. What I'd like to do is have people have an opportunity to start calling in, getting in the queue while we hear our first presentation, which will be the presentation by the CAO on item number 1. So let's go ahead and read out that information, please, if we can.
Sure. Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on today's agenda should call 1-669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-655-3266 and then press pound. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and begin by taking up item number 1, please.
Yes, sir. Item number 1 is an oral report by the City Administrative Officer relative to President Biden's proposed COVID relief package.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Huber, will you be presenting the report today?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Welcome.
Welcome. So I think my update will be relatively brief. As of Friday of last week, both the House and Senate have approved the 2021 budget resolution, which also includes the reconciliation process that would allow for the final budget legislation to be passed with a simple majority in the Senate. Based on the resolution that was approved, which is very broad in its information, it does look as if the major components of the President's proposed American Relief Plan are included. The only item that really seemed to be an issue of contention was the federal minimum wage. And so therefore, the things that I mentioned the last time we spoke relative to the funds for state and local, the first responders, and so on, those all appear to be intact. Of course, what is at issue is what the final legislation actually says. The budget resolution doesn't provide that information, and there's still a lot of room for negotiation and changes within the parameters of the resolution. So there's no additional information at this point on the key issue, which is the state and local funding in terms of how that would be allocated or when it would come. I do understand from the mayor's legislative team that we expect some information on that probably within this week. Or early next week, actually, by around February 16th. Both the House and Senate are very focused on getting a final package done by March 14th, which is when the enhanced unemployment insurance benefits would currently expire, since the proposal would extend those. So we're on a very tight time frame. I think we'll see a lot of updates over the coming weeks as the different House and Senate committees begin to take action on their respective areas to flesh out the parameters. At this point, if there's anything else that you'd like to know or any questions that you have, I will do my very best to respond to them.
Thank you very much. It sounds like there's positive momentum, still a very, very long way away from anything that we can take to the bank, figuratively and literally. Yeah, and that's with regard specifically to the aid to state and local government. The broader package, of course, and what that looks like will also indirectly have a fairly significant impact on the finances of the city, because how much actual economic stimulus there is and how much that contributes to increased tax revenues and so forth. Again, very much up in the air, not something that we have even a general sense of at this point until that train moves much further down the tracks. But it does seem to be moving in a positive direction, and that is a little bit of good news that we can take a little comfort in.
Yes, I think the only other unknown is the impact of the impeachment proceedings on this whole process.
Very good. Members, any questions for Ms. Huber? Mr. Blumenfield.
Yeah, just if you can, I know it's all very vague, but have we calculated sort of the range of, if they do include state and local government, what that means to us in terms of our budget deficit?
I don't have a basis on which to make that calculation, truthfully, because just using the coronavirus relief formula I don't think that's a good indicator, because it depends on if they set aside a certain amount of the total that would go to certain, like to the state level, and then what's the pot against which a local level would be calculated. As I mentioned the last time we met, there was quite a lot of dissatisfaction by smaller jurisdictions that they did not get, basically the population cutoff at which a jurisdiction could get its own allocation, because they were very dissatisfied with the amounts that they were getting from the state down to them. So there's going to be, I believe, a lot of lobbying by our smaller jurisdictions to be able to get their own direct allocation. And it's just really, until we kind of see what the House kind of, and this I understand from the mayor's legislative team, is that the House Oversight Committee may mark up some language on that in this next coming week. By February 16th is what they hear. And please don't hold me to that, because that's what they hear, but what happens is different than what we hear sometimes. Then we might have a better basis on which to maybe make a calculation. But right now, I just don't have a basis that makes sense to me. And I don't even know that population is the best variable on which to allocate those funds, right? But then again, I don't get to decide that.
No, it's exciting possibilities, but also, we could be certainly left out in the cold.
I think there's lots and lots of lobbying going on, and I'm sure that our team is doing its fair share to make sure our number is as big as possible. But as I said, even I heard, lots of dissatisfaction by smaller jurisdictions for the CRF funds that they felt sort of shafted and left out in that process. So I would expect that they just would lobby hard to get more funds. And then that just means more people, more jurisdictions getting a share of the pot directly. So it all factors into how much we might get.
Okay, thank you.
Members, any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Huber, very much, and we'll be continuing to have these reports as we move forward. Appreciate that update. Thank you very much. Members, on the agenda today, I would have the following recommendations for consent approval, and obviously we are not going to vote on any of these recommendations until after we hear public comment. But I would like to propose the following. On item number 9, I would recommend that, I understand that the clerk has recommendations on that matter for, that'll be read into the record. So why don't we go ahead and start with that.
Thank you. For item number 9, the recommendations would be to accept the certified results of the special election of the qualified electors of Community Facilities District Number 11, Ponte Vista, attached to the City Clerk communication dated February 1st, 2021, which is attached to Council File 13-1646-S7. Recommendation number 2 is to adopt the resolution declaring the results of special election and directing recording of special tax lien for Community Facilities District Number 11, Ponte Vista, attached to the City Clerk communication dated February 1st, 2021, attached to the Council File. Recommendation number 3 is to adopt the ordinance dated January 28th, 2021, attached to the City Attorney Report, attached to the Council File, levying special taxes within Community Facilities District Number 11, Ponte Vista. Recommendation number 4 is to instruct the City Clerk to record the notice of special tax lien to be provided by the Office of the City Administrative Officer within 15 days of adoption of the resolution declaring the results of the special election. Recommendation number 5 is to authorize the Office of the City Administrative Officer to make technical adjustments as necessary and to file any documents required under the Malauru's Act to implement the intent of the Mayor and Council actions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I would move that we approve those recommendations as part of the consent calendar. On item number 10, I would recommend that the committee concur in the Arts, Parks, Health, Education, and Neighborhoods Committee action to approve the City Attorney recommendations. On item number 11, I would recommend that we approve the CAO's recommendations in the reports dated November 20th, 2020, including letters of agreement for various MOUs, and December 3rd, 2020, including the draft ordinance for non-represented employees. And I understand the clerk has a technical clarification on the agenda description with regard to that matter as well.
Thank you, sir. You clarified it by stating both dates of the CAO reports. Thank you.
Okay. And then on item number 14, I would recommend that we concur with the Housing Committee and approve the motion. So those will be the recommendations for consent. We won't take any action on any of those until after we hear public comment. Mr. Blumenfield, did you have a comment?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, very good. Then we will proceed next into public comment. And we will take 2 minutes total for all agenda items from each speaker, and then 1 minute for general public comment for non-agenda item related matters. Let's go ahead and call our first speaker.
Those wishing to make public comment, please dial *9. Again, those wishing to make public comment, please dial *9. Caller with the last 4 digits 4024, please dial *6 to unmute. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
It's Herman. Herman. I want to speak on item 9, 10, and the other number, and 14. Is that okay? And general public comment. That's total 3 fucking minutes.
It's 2 minutes for agenda items plus 1 minute for general public comment. Go right ahead.
That's what I said, Ron. 3 minutes total.
No, you have 2 minutes. Speak to the agenda right now, or you waive those 2 minutes.
Well, with regards to what Miss Hubbard vaguely described about the deficit of $700 million on the Covet package. I find it difficult as an indicator of corruption that you've calculated abuse and waste by your inaccuracies of the census population count in Los Angeles. Due to the dissatisfied criminal lobbyist fools like you, on February 16th, you added a fault. What we hear will result the big pot shaft. Well, the only shaft I know is the one I cocked back.
Okay, I have no idea what you're talking about, so let's go to general public comment. He's waved his hand up. Go to general public comment. You have 1 minute for general public comment.
Housing discrimination during a crisis of COVID, you fucking criminals. Tenants can be not liable for the damages to pay because they're not working. They should file a complaint with the DFEH for a violation of the FEHA niggers within 1 year from the date upon which discrimination occurred, jackasses, morons, and fools. Or can file a suit on his or her behalf. Government Code Section dickheads 12980 and 129891 for the record. Fuck you, stupid budget man. Fuck you, Kevin Coleon, because you don't know how to play the leads into the play. And the rest of you, go to hell. I hope Covet comes to your door like God coming to tell you God hates homosexuals. The book of Romans, the book of Deuteronomy.
All right, time has expired. Thank you very much, Mr. Herman. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. Caller with the name call in user 1. Please dial *6 to unmute. Call in user 1.
Yes, speaker.
Okay, we'll go to caller with the last 4 digits 1403. Please dial *6 to unmute.
Yes, Your Excellency and executioners, all the general fucking items and the general public comment, if I can get my 9 minutes.
2 minutes on your agenda items, which will be followed by 1 minute of general public comment. Begin on the agenda items, please.
I told you De Leon didn't share it. Just stay on the fucking topic, puppet. Okay, sir. Number 1 was a good report. Biden's fucking the city of Los Angeles in the asshole because we have a mayor that's a faggot. We want the money. We only want $77.25 million out of the DEC COVID fund. It's not a lot of money, but to piss in the bucket. All right, so please deliver a Visa debit gift card issued by MetaBank to Bob Blobenbleel, Los Angeles City, for the budget deficit, and then we can pay our workers. Now, let's go ahead, since I'm running out of time on the items, let's just go and say fuck number 2, fuck number 3, fuck number 4, and let's get to number 5. Yes, I read that. Yes, I read the order regarding the attorney's fees of $146,000. We wouldn't be paying 5 cents if you just want to stop discriminating against people who love guns. And there's a lot of people who love guns. Like who? Well, our chief of police likes them. Mitchell Englander likes them. He was always armed when he lied to the FBI. A little joke at the FBI office. But I digress. So, law on number 5, give them $1 and a kick in the ass. Also, and this was an idea of Bob Blobenbleel, maybe you don't have to pay the NRA. If they get their charter revoked in New York, they won't exist. So maybe they can't collect. We'll see. Now we get to item number 6. Fuck number 6. We get to item number 7. Oh, that's another one. Wow. Yes, we have another one. Number 7, talking about more of that same shit. Number 10. Fuck number 10. 11 and 12, we will support those. And fuck number 14. Now we will get to our general public comment, if I may, sir. Do I get one minute? Yeah.
You're using it.
Why was Paul Peppa Pig Koretz and Mike Bonin kicked off of this committee in favor of De Leon, who can't say the Pledge of Allegiance, and Monaco? Well, it's very simple. It's because Nuri wants to put people that are brown and discriminate against people that are white. Exactly! Let's just come out of the closet. We have a racist for a city council president. Just like Herb Wilson was a racist. I recommend Gil Cedillo be immediately put in charge of the city budget and the city council. He's the only one that's not a racist, and he's the only one that doesn't have a dumb fucking son named after an H-rag. Those are good qualifications. You will fuck the budget up if you don't listen to Paul Koretz, and if you don't listen to Jose Huizar. He has your $80 million in his Swiss bank account. Yes, very good.
Okay,
Very
you're done.
cool.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 3534. Please hit *6 to unmute. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Morse, and I'd like to speak on item 11.
All right, you have 1 minute. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that the committee chair is recommending approval of item 11 according to CAO's recommendations. And I am a deputy city attorney with the City of Los Angeles, and I'm calling in on behalf of the City Attorney Women's Association, which has just transmitted today via the council file system and also via email to all council members a letter in support of paid parental leave for city employees. We think this is a critical benefit. We're thrilled that council is finally picking it up, and we'd really like to urge this committee and council at large to expedite consideration of the letters of agreement and the draft ordinance so that the paid parental leave they contemplate is institutionalized as established as soon as possible. This benefit is, quote, long overdue, according to Mayor Garcetti himself, and will do a lot to increase equity within the office and benefit all working parents and working women in particular. So we thank council for its attention to this issue, and we'd really like to encourage that this item be taken up by the full council as soon as possible so that it can be enacted for the benefit of city employees. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 2616. Please dial *6 to unmute. Please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Yes, it's Eric Previn. I'd like to speak on the items as well as the general public comment.
Okay, 2 minutes on agenda items plus a minute for general public comment, please.
Okay, thank you. And I do take note that Mike Bonin and Paul Koretz are no longer serving on budget and finance.
That's not on the agenda. Stick to the agenda item, please, or go to general public comment.
Okay, I was just saying De Leon and Monaco are on the committee now. I never noticed that, but fair enough. And I don't appreciate you taking my time. But the point is that the NRA is an organization. People who own firearms have to join frequently, cops and others and whatever. It's an odious organization, I think we can mostly agree. But nonetheless, when the city endeavored to try to make people who wanted contracts with City Hall disclose whether or not they had an affiliation of some kind to the NRA, people who are sober and fair-minded and, frankly, against gun violence said, that's ridiculous. That's a violation of the First Amendment. Don't do it. And, in fact, we were organized. We got a little committee together at Studio City Neighborhood Council. We voted. We got the CIS to speak for 5 minutes. You won't honor it. But we said, don't do it. It's a terrible idea. We agree about gun violence, but this is just dumb. And sure enough, the court found over a couple of years and now has penalized the city financially. Up to $150,000, you're looking at whether or not you can delay it further. Don't delay it anymore. It was $450 they were asking for. The lawyers for the NRA, but you should pay it out of your office holder accounts because it is an appalling turn of events that it occurred in broad daylight. As everybody said, don't do it. It's political. Why would you do it? And it's just one of a number of friendly fire lawsuits that are conducted at City Hall, which I find appalling. And speaking of which, Plum is one of the jurisdictions. Are we getting ready for my general, Mr. Krikorian? I don't want to be...
If you'd like to go to your general, that'd be fine, Mr. Previn.
Well, first, let me just say that the fiscal status report looks terrible. Let me know when I'm at my general. And I will say that that's not your fault because you didn't create this pandemic. But I will say that 100% FEMA double-checking to get 100% reimbursement, it's never going to be as good as we would hope. And it's really sad how it's come down to LAFD, once again, standing in the parking lot on quadruple overtime, getting fully reimbursed while, millions of Angelenos struggle to get by. So I wish it was different, but we should get what is our due. And I'll go to my general public comment now because I don't want to be cut off. Plum, which is Planning and Land Use, there's a chair named Marquise Harris-Dawson, and you're the Budget Committee who will fight the lawsuits. The other day, he seemed to misunderstand, and it's happened before, that every single item noticed on a special meeting agenda, and that's from a legal case called Eric Previn versus the City of Los Angeles, you have to take comments on those items. You have to. It's not a optional kind of a thing. And that's why the appellate court made a finding, and you had to pay the lawyer $100,000, and you had to pay other lawyers $250,000, and it's not fun. And nobody wanted to spend money on it. We just wanted the opportunity to be heard at a special meeting when something's noticed on the agenda. Now, unfortunately, because of Mr. Harris-Dawson's clumsy work with Mr. Ridley Thomas breathing down his neck and Gil Cedillo pontificating like an idiot, we're going to have to, unfortunately, bring the city in for contempt of the court's ruling. It's not the first time, Mr. Krikorian. You are at the epicenter of pretending that multiple items on an agenda are just one item in order to restrict the time, and then you say it's a donation of 60 seconds a day during public hearings. It's totally inappropriate. So I look forward to you correcting that. Cease and desist. Always take public comments at special meetings on notice items. And we'll talk more.
Thank you, Mr. Previn. Next speaker, please.
Caller with the last four digits, 7603. Please hit *6 to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please state your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Perfect. My name is Josh Nadell, and I'll be speaking on items 1, 12, and 13, as well as general public comment.
All right. Go right ahead with 2 minutes for your agenda items and 1 minute for general public comment.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Josh Nadell. I'm a board member of my local neighborhood council. I'm also the chair of a new budget advocacy alliance for the neighborhood council system. I also have an MBA and I'm a CPA candidate, and as well as being a state and federally licensed tax preparer. The reason why I mention all of this is I believe that I have a plan to fix the financial hole that the city's in. I have written up a proposal and have already spoken to a couple council offices and a couple other relevant city departments. I would love a chance to speak to each of you on this committee. Call your offices and get through. It's really not always easy to get through, but it's important that we try to fix this financial hole that the city's in. I believe that the idea I have is compelling. It ultimately involves making the city be incredibly green, not involving any sort of needing for federal legislation. It's a very ground-up kind of thing and involves just thinking a little bit differently. Everybody who I've shown the idea to seems very positive to it. And like I said, I would really relish the chance to get in front of all of you, talk with your legislative and budget teams, and show you how this proposal of mine potentially could be the future of Los Angeles and how we could use it to get out of this financial crisis right away. I've lived here all my life, and the city is very important to me. And I feel that just as a citizen, it was my civic duty to use the skills that I've acquired over the years at the various public institutions I've gone to and the various universities that gave me academic scholarships to give back to society. That, I guess, was the purpose of everybody giving me all these fine years of education. So I'd like to repay back society in kind, and it'll involve your teams talking to me. I'll be trying to reach out to your teams over the course of the rest of the week via both phone and email. I have a PDF that I can send you guys, but I'm not really sure to who.
Sir, did you want to move on to public comment?
I could put it all together combined if you want, and you could just let me know when I'm done. I mean, it's just basically the same topic, and I'm just about finished.
Okay, I'll add 1 minute for public comments.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, and just in general, I want to thank you guys for all the hard work that you're doing. Being a CPA candidate, I got a lot of skills for doing audit stuff, and the kind of budget hole that you guys are looking to deal with right now is incredibly difficult, and I imagine it's very stressful and has caused a lot of issues for you guys to deal with over the past year. I hope that we can resolve this and find a way how to give the city more revenues, and how our new crisis could be figuring out spending the new revenues that we have. Thank you. I appreciate it, and I hope that I can speak with you guys sometime soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Caller with call-in user 2, please hit *6 to unmute. Please state your name and speak on.
Miller's already spoken.
Okay. And we have one caller that, call-in user 1, are you able to hit *6 to unmute? Go ahead. What was your name and the items you'd like to speak on?
Fucking retard, cease and desist. We have our rights. You violate our civil rights. You violate the Brown Act. Fuck you, fucking.
I believe that is also a repeat caller. That ends our public comment callers.
Oh, you're muted.
Well, that would explain it. Sorry. I apologize. I don't know how many times I said that's a repeat caller and he's already spoken. I thank you for that, Ms. Rodriguez. Okay. So that will close public comment on all agenda items. It will close general public comment as well. And we can now take up the consent calendar recommendations that I previously offered. And let's go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Gregorian?
Yes.
I had questions on item 11, actually, if I could just very brief clarifying questions.
Sure. Why don't we go ahead and do that right now before we take up the consent calendar then.
And so the CAO, I guess, is available for the question. But I just wanted to confirm that the policy that we're adopting today actually aligns with the other MOUs of the represented parties, that all of these policies will be in alignment, or are there any variances in terms of what we're adopting today from what others may have negotiated?
Hello. Hello?
Councilmember Rodriguez, this is Rich Llewellyn, the CAO. This is the result of our negotiations with our labor partners, and this is consistent with that.
Terrific. Thank you.
All right. Is there anything else, any other concerns or questions about the consent calendar? All right, let's go ahead and call the roll then, please.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
De Leon.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
5 ayes. These items are approved as stated. Items 9, 10, 11, and 14.
Very good. Let's go ahead and next take up item number 8.
Item number 8 is the Los Angeles Department and Building and Safety report relative to a request to refund $516,000 $901.30 from the Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety Building Permit Enterprise Fund, Development Service Trust Fund, and the City Planning Systems Development Fund.
Okay, and do we have somebody from DBS on this matter? Okay, well, what I had wanted to ask about this is simply whether the CAO had evaluated it and made a recommendation yet. So what I'd like to do is hold this in committee until our next meeting, and I'd like to hear recommendations from the CAO and the CLA on this proposed refund. So is there any objection to that course of action? All right, well, let's go ahead and hold that item then in committee. That will bring us next to item number 15. Let's call item 15, please.
Yes, item number 15 is a motion, Krikorian and Blumenfeld, relative to instructing the CAO to report on the current state of the city's submitted reimbursement requests to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, anticipated revenues, and what the change to an 100% reimbursement means for the total reimbursement the city should expect to receive, and to submit revised reimbursement requests for 100% of the city's eligible expenses to FEMA as soon as possible. The Ad Hoc Committee on COVID-19 Recovery and Neighborhood Investment waived consideration of this matter.
Okay. Is there any need for discussion on this item, members? Ms. Huber, did you want to comment at all on this at this point, or should we just go ahead and advance this and then get our report back?
I was really here for questions. If there are no questions, then I would assume you would just approve it, and we'll provide a written report.
Terrific. All right. Mr. Blumenfield?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to, I mean, the urgency of this, just to express that is it's very urgent, because if we, the sooner we can figure this out, we can move from a resource problem to a financing problem, is the way I look at it. And I'd much rather deal with a finance problem than a resource one. But this is just to ask for the report, so I'm 100% for it, obviously.
The one thing on the point of urgency, Ms. Huber, it's my understanding that we will not need to resubmit previous applications for FEMA reimbursement, but that the change from 75 to 100% reimbursability will happen automatically on Washington's end. Is that correct?
That is what I understand from the statement that FEMA released last week.
Right.
For projects that are already that have already been through their process.
Okay. So since it's
still unclear for sure what the world of 100% reimbursement might entail until we get their guidance.
Okay. So since we have all departments essentially participating, since we have an FSR, I would just take this opportunity to urge all departments to prepare your reimbursement requests and submit them to the CAO with all deliberate speed, because we just can't have reimbursement opportunities held up because we haven't properly documented them and submitted them. So that would be my plea to each of you. All right, is there any other discussion on this motion, or can we proceed to a vote? I see no hands. Let's go ahead and call the roll.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
De Leon.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
5 ayes. This motion is approved.
Very good. Thank you. Let's go ahead and call next item number 12, please.
Yes, sir. Item number 12 is a CAO reports relative to the COVID-19 Emergency Response Account General City Purposes Fund status report for the weeks ending January 22nd, 2021 through January 29th, 2021.
Good afternoon, Samantha Chu with the Office of the City Administrative Officer.
Good afternoon.
Before the committee are weekly status reports covering approved expenditures from the COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund for the period January 18, 2021 through January 29, 2021. As of January 29, 2021, the remaining balance is $8.97 million. I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Members, any questions on this item? Ms. Rodriguez, you're muted if you're speaking.
No, I was just double checking something. Sorry,
Okay.
1 second.
Mr. De Leon.
I'm fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Very good. Then we'll note and file the report, and we do have to vote on even a note and file. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then let's go ahead and call the roll, please.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
De Leon. De Leon. Rodriguez.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
And back to De Leon.
Mr. De Leon.
Aye.
5
Thank you.
ayes. Thank you. 5 ayes. This item will be noted and filed.
Very good. Thank you very much. That will bring us next to item number 13, the FSR.
Item number 13 is a CAO report relative to updates on actions taken to implement the amendments to the second financial status report of 2020-21.
All right. Mr. Llewellyn, will you be presenting this?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me. This report is an update on the city's current year budget since the second FSR was presented in December. First, just a reminder of where we've been. As you know, in that report, we identified a $675 million budget cap, $600 million short in revenue, and $75 million that we owed the Public Works Trust Fund for COVID expenditures. We also identified almost $21 million in overspending, which we had not yet solved. We proposed, and your committee and the council and mayor approved, a plan to offset most of the budget gap through a combination of budget cuts, additional COVID relief funds, transfers from the general fund reserves, deficit borrowing, and labor cost reductions. Before you today is our update to our December report. Unfortunately, we're presenting an even larger budget gap in our new report. As we noted in our December report, we recommended solutions to our gap, but for about $21 million. Our unsolved gap now has gone up to about $78 million. The most significant changes since our December FSR report have resulted from our ongoing labor negotiations with our labor partners. Let me give you sort of an overview of that process. As I think you know, we have reached tentative agreements with all of our general fund, civilian, and sworn labor partners. Many of these agreements have been ratified by the union membership, and they will be in council tomorrow. The remaining are in various stages of the ratification process. I have to be a little careful how I talk about these labor agreements because under labor law, I don't want to infect or affect the ratification process for the members. Still, the basic framework for each of the agreements is the same. Our labor partners have agreed to defer most raises until the end of next fiscal year at the earliest, to give us some time this year and next year without additional raises, and to extend their contracts without additional compensation. In return, our principal response, we've agreed to no furloughs and no layoffs for this year only. These agreements present savings in this fiscal year and in subsequent years. And while these agreements provide ongoing savings, unfortunately, the savings for this year do not fully offset our agreement to no furloughs and our agreement to no layoffs. Beyond these labor changes, which I'm happy to talk further if you want, we're also recommending the report before you more budget cuts, almost $55 million, and various funding sweeps to reserve fund, another $15 million. Together, all of these changes result in our $78 million budget gap. As your committee knows well, closing this gap is going to be a challenge. You've already done the easy things, you've already done the hard things. Very significant budget cuts, an agreement to reduce our hard-earned reserves that this committee has fought for over the years, down to the emergency reserve level, below our policy and certainly below our goals, and deficit borrowing. We're also concerned that there could be downside risk to revenue. We are not reporting on revenue at this time. We'll be back before you in a few weeks with that when we have more information, particularly on business tax and property taxes. But our revenue estimates before did not anticipate such a significant additional shutdown at the end of last year. And we know all of you would like to spend even more money on response to COVID in your communities. Not just what we have already spent, but what we need to spend. Like you, we're monitoring events in Washington on a probably hourly basis. We hope we'll see new federal relief in a general stimulus package, and we hope that the FEMA rule changes help us with budget balancing this year and with responding to COVID. But as Patty pointed out, we just don't know the rules yet, including FEMA has not put out regs about its new policy statements to see what the FEMA rules even are. At this point, we don't know what we're going to take in this year in additional funds. So unfortunately, we're left addressing with the deficit now. In your approval of the second FSR, you made several amendments. We've addressed each of them in turn in the report, and if you'd like to discuss any of the specific items or more details on the proposed reduction, we're happy to address your questions. Ben Seha will take the lead and make sure of the appropriate staff members there. And our goal over the next few months is to keep working with your committee to solve this last deficit. One final housekeeping point. We do have technical corrections that have been distributed that will need read to the record before you act on the item. And I'm here for sort of big picture questions, and our staff is here for any of the detail you have.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Llewellyn. And members, just a brief comment on the labor issues. This growth of the problem to solve for the fiscal year is not a significant surprise. This is, in fact, the impact on this year that was the expected result of these the outcome of labor negotiations, some of which is still pending ratification. But it's important to keep in mind, and it's important for the public to keep in mind, that the increased challenge that we have for this year is because, number one, we have avoided service cuts that would have come from enacting the furloughs. And then the second point is there are going to be significant savings as a result of these agreements in the coming fiscal year, where we are likely to have at least as big a problem as we do now, barring some unforeseen change in direction. So if you think of this as an 18-month issue rather than a 6-month issue, the savings are considerable. But that does give us still a short-term challenge that we do need to address. And I would ask members to just remember that some of these collective bargaining agreement amendments have not been ratified, and so it would not be appropriate for us to ask detailed questions about them or Mr. Llewellyn will tell us if we're overstepping our bounds, because we don't want to appear to be attempting to influence the ratification votes. So with that, I'm going to ask members if you have any questions, first for Mr. Llewellyn, and then when we're done with that, we can go to our department-specific questions if you have any, and we'll call our departmental roll call, and we'll let people go if they're not part of that. So first questions for the general questions for the CAO. Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. Thank you, Rich. I had a quick question on salary savings from planned attrition. Is that incorporated into the projections?
Yes, council member. We tried to, your budget was premised on a hiring freeze. So unfortunately, a lot of those savings are already gone because we already expected them.
Okay. And on the overspending account, how does that compare to previous years when finances were much better? How do we look in comparison?
Well, I don't want to, Mr. Krikorian knows better than I, but when we reported we were 20 million off in December, that was a very modest problem to have to solve over the course of the normal rest of the year. In fact, that's probably less than we normally are at that point. But it's the 20 million on top of the 600 million that causes the problem.
Got it. And then my final question, are there any other debt or borrowing options that are being explored to help address the budget gap?
So council members, y'all, I appreciate the fact that our council policies and your policies require transparency. You have already approved us to investigate borrowing. We have hired financial advisors with your approval who are looking at we have this short-term working capital option and then at more borrowing. We hope we don't go there, but we are looking, we have retained consultants and we will be back before you certainly if we're going to do it by March at the latest to get approval. It will certainly be on the public record, and even just talking to consultants, your financial policies require we tell our residents so they're not surprised.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you. Yeah, and on the borrowing thing, I'm very concerned as we start borrowing for operational expenses. It's another story if we're borrowing to deal with FEMA reimbursable things where we have an actual revenue stream. We should, that's a loan I'll take all day, but it's the other ones that really concern me, and I know they concern you. I did, sort of along the lines of borrowing, one thing that concerns me is our deferred contract payments, because that's essentially borrowing from our contractors against their will, or without their permission, I should say, which is kind of the opposite of what we've been trying to do, which is to expedite payments, because we know that that's also what fuels small businesses, what fuels more diverse businesses from being able to participate in the city. What capacity do we have as a city to identify in a fair, systemic way which payments can be delayed without causing undue hardship? And how are we, I'm very concerned that that's even part of our thinking, but how are we going about making those judgments?
So, council members, as a general matter, it's our departments who have these contract relationships, looking at their contracts and whether there are any possibilities of extending payment. I don't like borrowing, certainly in any way either, other than long-term borrowing for capital. Even borrowing it against revenue, like FEMA, is one you have to be very careful on, because sometimes when you're borrowing against revenue, tax, even sales tax or whatever, you're not right in your projections. I do think part of what we have asked our employees, part of what we have asked our contractors is, can you help? And so I don't think there's in this tough situation, asking our kind of employment partners, asking our contract partners, can you help? Some of them are going to say no. Some of their contracts don't allow that. I don't believe we have the power to, in most cases, it's obviously purchase by purchase, to just not pay. But I think the instructions to us were to turn over every stone. I don't know that will be the most, viable stone, to be honest. But I don't know that I think it's reasonable to be looking at that. You asked both whether if there were cost of livings that could be given up in any of our contract partners, could any of our partners change their terms of payment? I don't know that it's going to be a huge gusher of funding, but I think it's so we've asked our departments to look at that. And those will certainly be brought back to you.
Great. No,
there.
Appreciate that. And I won't get into detail. I know I have questions about the employee contracts, but I'm sensitive that I can't ask detailed questions right now because they're pending. But how much are we actually saving this year with the civilian labor agreement? Is there a number on that?
We are anticipating saving about $23 million this year. And they both deferred raises and agreed to 2 unpaid days. So they're the 2 components.
And how much did the SIP save us for this year?
We don't have the final numbers, sir, because we have not sort of calculated the actuals. But it did, as we've said, it saved us a little money, and it is saving us money next year, both years. And long term, we have some 1,000 people left the workforce early, which will save us money on an ongoing basis.
So it's going to
save. Some of those would have left, but we estimate roughly 1,000 left early.
It's actually going to save us money next year. I thought next year was going to be a cost.
A slight savings, sir. The most recent numbers.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bloomfield. And just to further point on the contractor issues, there's several different issues here that Mr. Llewellyn spoke about. One is just asking for some shared sacrifice from contractors in the same way that we ask for shared sacrifice from our own employees. And that is something that I think has to be, just as a matter of equity, a part of our cost savings calculus. But the other simpler part of that is simply deferring scheduled payments that would otherwise be due in the fourth quarter. So that we're talking about about a 90-day delay in payments simply to shift those costs into the next fiscal year. It doesn't realize a real savings. It just helps us to balance this year's books, by paying those obligations, the same obligations, and paying them at the beginning of the fiscal year in the same way that we do often with legal settlements, for example, that we structure them in a way that spreads the cost over the course of fiscal year. And there are businesses that will not like that. There are businesses that will not maybe be able to handle that cash flow problem. But departments, I think, can make that assessment, and if there's a case to be made, then certainly the CAO and we would want to consider that. Any other comments or questions for the CAO before we get to departments, members? Okay, then let's, thank you, Mr. Llewellyn. Let's go ahead and determine which department-specific questions members may have. For myself, I'd like to ask for sanitation and engineering. And I also have some questions about the controller's office as well. Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Gregorian. I too have sanitation, so thank you. I have questions for LAPD and DOT and the Office of Finance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Devian.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Have questions also too for sanitation, El Pueblo as well as Public Works.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Price, any department-specific requests?
Mine was called. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You covered me too.
Mr. Blumenfield, you're good? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so just to make sure, let me know if I missed anybody. I have sanitation, LAPD, DOT, finance, engineering, El Pueblo, Public Works, and the Controller's Office.
Excuse me, Mr. Gregorian, I'm sorry, I also forgot Rec and Parks, please.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, so for the other folks on the call, I'd like to ask Rec and Parks, Sanitation, LAPD, DOT, Finance, Engineering, El Pueblo, Public Works, and the Controller to stay on the line. And everyone else, thank you very much for checking in. Glad you could join us. You don't have any other reason to stay on this call, at least for this agenda item. Okay, so Ms. Rodriguez, why don't we begin with you, and let's start with Rec and Parks.
Terrific. And actually, we can take perhaps Rec and Parks, because the questions are similar for Rec and Parks and LAPD.
Okay.
And it's with respect to their general fund budgets that are applied for youth programs and what cost savings might have been garnered as a result of a shutdown of any operations of youth programs and have as a result of COVID. And so what savings have been realized in those departments, and have that been applied to any of the deficits?
Okay, so let's have a representative from Rec and Parks answer that first, and then we'll go to LAPD. Who's on the line for Rec and Parks? Okay, let's see if we can get somebody from Rec and Parks on the line to respond to Ms. Rodriguez's question, and in the meantime, we'll go to LAPD. Who do we have to speak on behalf of LAPD?
Mr. Krikorian, it's Assistant Chief Beatrice Grimala. I'm on.
Oh, hello, Chief. Okay. So were you able to hear Ms. Rodriguez's question?
Yes, I did. And I know we have Anne Marie Sauer-Hale on and Tom Brennan to speak to any related dollar amounts. The majority of LAPD's current youth programs, for example, as we talk about the cadet program, PALS, etc., as many of you already know, are privately funded or through donation and fundraising efforts. For example, the cadet program is funded by the Ray Charles Foundation and continues to be funded by that foundation. When we talk about PALS, for example, just to name a couple specifics on PALS, Devonshire PALS, Hollenbeck PALS, etc., their fiduciary obligations are raised through fundraising efforts with the community. I see Tom Brennan joined us. Tom or Anne-Marie, did you want to join in with regard to the youth program fiduciary responsibilities?
At this point, the majority of the youth programs are meeting virtually, and we can get a report back to you on what the financial impact has been as far as salary savings or redeployment of individuals who would be normally working on those programs and have been reassigned to other activities during the COVID.
What I can add to that point of Mr. Brennan's is our youth programs unit staffing is remaining the same. It has through COVID, as Mr. Brennan stated, as we're still trying to connect youth virtually and stay, keeping that bridge functioning both ways. It's, again, I must acknowledge in candor, very, very difficult. But as we look forward throughout this fiscal year, we are not looking at a diminishing of the actual employees assigned to oversight of those programs.
So just to be clear then, so there's zero general fund dollars being applied to any operations of the program, either direct or indirect, that may have been impacted for budgetary savings?
That's correct. There wouldn't be a general fund budgetary savings because the staff that is working on them is either funded through specialized funding. For example, with the Community Safety Partnership, we fund the base salary, and overtime and advanced pay grades are funded through HACLA or the Balmer Foundation. We're making a transition from the Balmer Foundation to department funded, city funded, that was part of the part of the original agreement with Balmer for funding the Community Safety Partnership program. The remainder of the employees who are assigned to those youth programs, as Chief Kamala said, are still assigned to them and working diligently to remain engaged through whatever virtual means or limited in-person means that are available.
Okay. And that includes Jeopardy as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. This is Ben Seha, and I could speak to the question related to recreation and parks. Because recreation and parks receives a charter mandated appropriation from the city, we have not used any resources appropriated to recreation and parks to address our budget deficit, the budget gap that we've been reporting on.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions for LAPD, as long as they're here? Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's go next to DOT. We have somebody here from the Department of Transportation.
Yes, hi, it's Angela Brewerman from LADOT.
Hi. All right, Ms. Rodriguez, DOT was called by you.
Thank you so much. So I just had a question about the early pay LA program and how, I know it's assisting in accelerating the collection. How has that fared in comparison to what was collected before in terms of measuring the efficacy of the time of collections versus what we had to perhaps expunge or chase down? And just in terms of the percentage of repayment, are we in a stronger position in terms of recovery as a result of this program?
Well, I'd like to start off by saying that the Early Pay LA program began November 2nd of 2020, and as of the date of this report, we only had 2 months of data available. So it wasn't, widely publicized. It was publicized, but I don't think, these programs tend to take some time for them to catch on. But what we have seen just in these 2 months is that the actual rate of pay is very similar to what it was pre-COVID. So the people that tend to pay within the first 48 hours, it's probably about 12% of those who receive the citations, and that's very similar to what we've seen even pre-COVID. So right now it's about the same, but it's a fairly new program, so we believe we would need more time to see how this would really shake out.
Okay, thank you.
If I can just follow up on that, just to make sure I understand. So despite the incentive for early payment, we haven't seen an uptick in the percentage of early pays?
That's correct.
So we essentially, I mean, I guess we'll have to wait to see how this plays out over time, but that sounds as though that was not an investment of potential revenues that actually produced any dividends for the city's budgetary issues.
But we also, if I may, Mr. Florian, and if you could follow up, DOT, how do our issuance of citations compare? I mean, we reduced the number of the citations that we were issuing as well. So how does that fare in terms of the return, given the reduction in citations that has been, because we just restored enforcement in October, was it?
Correct, in October. Yes, and issuance is significantly down prior to what it was before COVID. Councilmember Krikorian, to answer your question, you know, the LADOT calculates the citation collection rate that spans anywhere from a year to 18 months, considering the life of a ticket takes, you know, so long for, you know, a majority of them to come into the city's general fund. So I think that it's difficult for us to really, you know, make too specific of comments on the efficacy at this point in time. I think we would want to wait and see what happens to our overall collection rate for a little while before commenting on that. But I mean, straight out of the gate, it's very similar, but we don't have the data for the overall collection rate at this point.
I mean, if the goal is to maximize payment, then maybe an approach, I hate to spitball things like this, but maybe another way to go would be to look at providing amnesty for delinquent tickets after a certain period of time, in the same way we have done with many other fines and penalties and other unpaid accounts receivable that the city has. It might be something worth looking at to see that after a ticket has aged to a certain point, that and fines have accrued and the amount has increased, that maybe we provide relief there for prompt payment of those delinquent tickets. It might be something to look into. I also wanted to follow up on Ms. Rodriguez's point about resuming enforcement. Because I guess I'm a little unclear on where we stand with actually resuming enforcement on parking citations, because I think the department was given clear instruction by the council on that, and I just want to make sure that instruction has in fact been followed. And Mr. Llewellyn, if you're still on the line too, if you can comment about the receipt of parking penalties now and what we're assuming about those penalties, because did I read correctly that we assumed in this document that enforcement would resume as of the end of this fiscal year rather than now?
Mr. Chair, that I am not sure of. Ben, do you have that in front of you?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't have the document in front of me this minute, but did I understand correctly that we had assumed that revenues from resumed enforcement would begin as of the end of this fiscal year, as opposed to immediately, as we thought was going to happen?
Councilmember, I think now I understand your question. Our budget assumptions, not that they're not collecting at all, that they're not collecting much, and that they will start in fact the economy will reopen later in the year. So it's not that it's zero, it's that it's still depressed because the economy is so closed.
I see. So that's not a reflection of enforcement strategy as much as it is your budgetary assumption about the number of parked cars there are out there that are in violation of.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That makes more sense to me. Great. Thank you. Anything else for DOT members? All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Bruman. So let's go next then to the Office of Finance. And Ms. Rodriguez, you're still leading off.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gregorian. So this is with respect to the license, permits, fees, and fines. And I was curious if the, given that we've had such attrition, what has been the impact of generating revenue from some of our permits, the permit fees and fines? How has that contributed to our revenue stream, given the attrition and staffing, and how is that looking?
Hi, Council Member. This is Diana Mangiolu with the Office of Finance. Is this specifically for the fire and police permit?
Well, processing license fees and just all related.
Attrition as it relates to the Office of Finance.
Correct.
Okay. Well, in terms of the hiring freeze itself, in terms of staff that we're losing due to SIP, we have been able to process the permit fees, the renewal fees that are coming in, and right now we're in the middle of our renewal season as well. It's hard to say exactly what the monetary impact of that is going to be, but it's the way it's impacted our department because we've been trying to manage the loss of institutional knowledge. But in terms of kind of boiling that down to a monetary number, we're managing. I think the next couple of months are really going to be insightful for us because we're in the middle of our busy season, and so how we end up processing everything in March and hopefully everything that we're able to process within the fiscal year will be more telling. So it's difficult to say right now.
Okay. So just in terms of the pace that, and I mean, I know some of it is impacted by the pandemic, but just in terms of being on pace from where we were, and I recognize that many of your staff have also been deployed as disaster service workers. So I was just trying to get an understanding because obviously you're an important part of how we're helping to collect on the revenue opportunity. So I just wanted to get a better sense of what you're, in terms of maintaining pace from where we were before. But just to
and in terms of, and thank you for asking, but in terms of our permit fees, which is more of an administrative process, we are staffed to do that, so we're doing okay. In terms of what our tax revenues will look like, and especially what our business tax will look like, we really won't be able to say until we get to the end of February, when we have most of our taxes coming in. I mean, right now we're pretty much in the middle of it. I think it's no secret that TOT has been low and continues to be low every month as we receive those monthly payments. And we're also seeing low revenue numbers in sales tax as well. Now, in terms of staffing, because we have a higher vacancy rate in our tax and permit enforcement and also our audit section, that means we're able to churn out as many audits as we used to. We're unable to, we don't have as many soldiers doing the tax and permit enforcement that we used to. So in that sense, we're unable to be as effective in our discovery. But otherwise, when it comes to more of the administrative revenue collection efforts, we're doing okay.
Thank you so much.
Members, anything else for finance? Mr. Bloomfield? I do want to say, just as long as I have you here, Ms. Mangioglu, I want to say that finance has been doing a really great job of getting word out to our business community about the various programs that are available to assist them. The website has been really good about getting that information out. It's sometimes tough for small businesses in particular to come by that information. So I did want to make a point to thank you for that. Anything else, members, for finance? Okay, thank you very much. Let's go next to Mr. De Leon. Why don't we bring up El Pueblo next?
Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Question I have for folks, we do have staff members for El Pueblo right now?
I'm hoping that they're going to pop up. Okay. There we go.
We got them there?
Actually, Mr. De Leon, we were not able to reach Mr. Chavez, but CAO here is available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay.
Maria Gutierrez.
All right, thank you, Maria. I like your Virgen de Guadalupe.
Thank you.
Right, there you go. So a question, for Mr. Chavez is that if staff can explain the revenue losses that El Pueblo merchants have experienced since the beginning of the pandemic, how much has the revenue been down, and has it impacted the department's budget specifically? And what methods have you all done to cover the department expenses? I know you may not have those answers now, but perhaps you can get those answers back. I'm not sure. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but you let me know, Ms. Gutierrez.
So I don't have all those numbers here with me, but I will say that the Pueblo revenue losses have been a combination of sources, not just the merchants' leases, fees, rents, but also parking revenue losses. So that has been significant for the department. We have been reporting the status of these revenue losses in our financial status report. This year, the council did waive 6 months worth of leases, rents, and I understand that there are some concerns about the merchant's ability to pay rent for the next 6 months of the fiscal year. So that is where we are right now.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez. Through the chair, I'd like a report back from El Pueblo and the CAO with any recommendations for how we can balance El Pueblo books and take into account the desire not to put a financial burden either on the department or the vendors themselves. I'd like to, if it's possible, see this report also at the upcoming I'd like that this report also look at the upcoming, I should say, rep payments and a strategy to address those issues as well.
Okay. I think if there's no objection, we can add that request to the recommendations that are before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez, for pinch hitting.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Gutierrez. Appreciate it.
And if we can next call up Public Works and Mr. De Leon.
Thank you much. We got someone, Mr. Chair, for Public Works.
Good.
Yes, we do, Councilman De Leon. We have President
and Dr. Campos
and Paul Roch as well.
Okay, wait, I'm sorry, Mr. Campos, and who else, Mr. Campos?
President Good, President Gray Good.
Okay. Great,
and
fantastic.
Paul Roch, Director of Community Beautifications.
Okay.
Hi, Councilman.
Hi, how you doing? How you doing?
Good.
Good to see you. Question I have is, could you please explain the impacts of the cuts to the Clean and Green program? How many people will possibly lose their jobs, and how old are they, more or less the average age of those who will lose their jobs if in fact we move forward with the cuts to the Clean and Green program? and how this will impact these services if we move forward with the reductions in terms of staff.
Councilmember, I think that the exact number, and I'll defer to Dr. Campos and Paul, but it nears 100, certainly, and these are late teenagers, early 20s, and these are folks who are regularly deployed all over the city, doing, and by the way, they are folks almost exclusively from frontline low-income communities. And these are folks who have a demonstrable impact on their households. You have a lot of folks in the Clean and Green program who are actually contributing a disproportionate amount of their income, at least according to LACC, during the COVID time. And so that income really matters to those households. And then these are folks who are deployed across the city to do everything, contribute in everything from weed abatement to loose litter pickup to even small personal, are often referred to as small bulky items, and really a panoply of services across the city. Dr. Campos and Paul can probably go a little deeper on that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gay.
Great. I'll defer to Paul on this one, but I will echo what our president indicated as well, and that is these are individuals that are typically youth, typically from low-income, disadvantaged community. These are the folks that are actually helping us do the Clean and Green program. So we do employ anywhere from about 175 to 200 staffers that are assisting this program, plus our contractors as well. But this specific cut would be basically targeted to those individuals that are performing the services on the ground. And Paul, if you wanted to add a little bit more to the composition and spirit level impact.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Paul, before you begin, if I can ask others to please mute your microphones because we're getting a lot of that feedback loop thing. Mr. De Leon, if you wouldn't mind, while Mr. Rax is speaking. Thank you. Go right ahead.
So yeah, this would impact probably somewhere between 80 to 90 jobs for young adults, probably ages 18 to 21. Typically, Clean and Green does hire, younger kids, but they haven't been doing that during the COVID period of time. So we're looking at primarily 18 to 21-year-olds. It's overall, it's about a 30% cut to the Clean and Green budget. But it is about a 50% cut to the general fund portion of the Clean and Green budget, which really is what allows them to work citywide on all sorts of jobs. A portion of their funding is through special funds, through sanitation. And so the work that they do for that really has to be dedicated specifically to something tied into that special fund. So this would actually equate to about a 50% cut to the work they do as through the general fund, which includes, everything from tree maintenance, tree watering, alley cleanup, some graffiti removal, litter abatement, weed abatement. Pretty much, I think everybody's familiar with the work that Clean and Green does.
No, thank you very much. Excuse me, Mr. Rax. Let me ask you a question. Have we met before?
Well, oh no. Sorry, I just hit the wrong button. Yeah, council member. Yeah, we met when you were campaigning, and I'm a resident of Eagle Rock, and you.
That's right. I just read. Yeah.
Little discussion out in front of my house.
Yeah, that's right. Apologies.
Exactly. Have I seen you someplace before? Kind of question, Kevin.
Apologies to the chair about my.
Paul is a social butterfly, council member.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm elected to CD14.
Thank you, Mr. President, as well as Dr. Campos. And I thought I knew you. I thought we had run into each other. You're right. We had a lovely conversation outside your house. Through the chair. And I thank you very much. Mr. Rax, Mr. President, good, as well as Dr. Campos for the very thorough explanation of those who will be impacted. The 50% cut in the general fund, the 30% cut specific to this program. And I think, as we know, this is a very difficult time. It'd be devastating for many of these young men and young women late teens, early 20s. A lot of this income is being utilized to cover the expenses, and I would venture to say that a lot of these young men and women, their families have been devastated by the devastating impacts of the coronavirus, both the infection rate as well as the mortality rate, and obviously the services that we benefit from because of their labor. Through the chair, I'd like to continue the clean and green item to the next committee meeting and ask that the Board of Public Works, through the President, Mr. Good, to report back on the use of the Public Works Trust Fund to temporarily cover the costs for the Clean and Green program for this fiscal year, and ask that the board report give us a sort of a roadmap on paying back the fund in the fiscal year 21-22 budget. So, Mr. Chair, if you would be kind enough, I'd like to submit that for your discretion.
Thank you very much. I think that is a sensible approach, but I see that there's other members who want to speak, I think, to that. So let me take next Mr. Price, followed by Mr. Blumenfield. Mr. Price, you don't appear to be muted, but I can't hear you.
There you go.
There.
I too share the concerns that this program, cutting this program, is really going to negatively impact the many communities around the city. We know that they are not a source of last resort, but an important resort for those that are trying to get a leg up. And I think for all the reasons stated by Mr. Good and Mr. Rax, and by my colleague Kevin De Leon, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that that we amend the CAO report to strike recommendation 32. Strike 32 and continue the cleaning and green program and the LA Youth program as proposed.
Okay.
There might be a second. I don't know.
It looks like Mr. De Leon is prepared to second that. And Ms. Rodriguez, I had her hand up. So, Mr. Blumenfield, let's before we discuss these collectively, let me hear first from Mr. Blumenfield and then Ms. Rodriguez.
First off, I agree 100% with my colleagues who were talking about the importance of the Clean and Green program. It is the definition of preserving city services and dealing with our at-risk, dealing with diverse populations. So, and we've always talked about this in past FSRs. This is not a smart cut to make. It ends up costing us more in the long run. I actually think it's the perfect candidate if we're going to, and I would support deleting instruction 32 in the CAO report, but perhaps we could just solve it right here and instead transfer $480,433 from the UB reserve for preservation to Board of Public Works for Clean and Green program, and similarly $112,500 for the higher LA Youth program, because we have sort of this. We have these funds that are really not funds, but are the money that we've identified for the preservation of city service and other things that we could toward. At the end of the day, it's money we don't have. It's all coming out of borrowed money because anything that we do, whether we take it out of that particular fund that I mentioned or whether we just cut it outright, it's going to be money that we have to borrow against because we're borrowing for operating expenses. But I agree that it is a critical one, and I would put forward that one. It might be even cleaner, but I'm open to any idea in terms of preserving the Clean and Green program.
I second that as well.
A twist to the Price's amendment.
I second that, Mr. Blumenfield, particularly because we're still going to, at the end of the day, we're going to have the same conversation as how we pay for it. And I think it addresses the very root causes of what we, in fact, we're trying to address. with that reserve. So it feels absolutely appropriate. And so I second your recommendation.
Okay. So let me see if I can kind of stitch all of this together. Because I think that a lot of these things might not be mutually exclusive. So if we start with Mr. Price's proposal simply not to cut this program at this point, to eliminate that recommendation, we can still revisit this, as Mr. De Leon has asked, with a report back in 30 days regarding alternative potential sources of funding, whether it's borrowing from the trust fund, whether it's appropriating from the UB, as Mr. Blumenfield has suggested. I think those are all worthy discussions to have, whether AB 1290 funds or other sources of funds might be appropriate, because at the end of the day, this is all deficit funding, spending. We don't have any of this money because we're already, borrowing in 9 digits in order to get through the fiscal year. So I wholly agree with, I think, what seems to be the consensus of the extraordinary importance of this program, and that we do not want to cut these young people off from this program, and we do not want to deprive the neighborhoods of the city of Los Angeles with the benefits that this program delivers as well. So I think it sounds like we all agree with that, and we should approve the recommendations suggested by Mr. Price. But I think in addition to that, we should bring this back in 30 days, as Mr. De Leon suggested, with further consideration of what would be appropriate funding sources to fill this gap. Because, look, by doing this, we are adding a gap and another gap to the $77 million gap we already have to fund, right? So if we're prepared to do that, I think we are, we need to have a serious discussion about where that money is going to come from. And that much can wait and be reported back next month, as Mr. De Leon recommends. Does that make sense? Does that bring all of this together?
That makes sense, Mr. Chair.
That's all my issues, yes.
Mr. Chair, let me add, I think that makes sense, and thank you very much for tying this all together. You did an excellent job. Thank you.
Very good. And hopefully, if we keep our fingers crossed, maybe in 30 days we've made some progress in figuring out appropriations, bless you, Mr. Blumenfield, of the UB, or maybe there's been some movement on some other things. So if that is, if everybody's in agreement with that, let's stick with that plan and add that to the recommendations that are before us today. Okay. So that brings us next to sanitation. Unless anybody else had anything else different for Public Works, I don't see anything. So let's go next to sanitation.
Thank you all very much. We'll be prepared with the report.
President Good, thank you. Mr. Rocks, thank you. Okay, Bureau of Sanitation, please.
My name is Rodriguez. I'm from Sanitation.
All right. Ms. Rodriguez, do you want to start us off?
Yes. Actually, it was related to clean and green as well. And so I think we've clearly already addressed that in the last conversation with respect to with Public Works. But I will have a follow-up for the Bureau of Sanitation. How has clean and green been utilized in absence of services that were previously provided by I know there's been a reduction in care, for example. Has clean and green services been deployed in the attrition of those services? Is there any coordination between sanitation and clean and green?
What's kind of hard for sanitation is because since our budget was cut by over $10 million, it's a little difficult for us to front fund some of the clean and green activities. unlike before. So with regards to the clean and green activities, there hasn't really been I haven't seen any transfers or anything with regards to that type of activity. As far as I'm aware, it's kind of flat.
Okay. Because as I recall, and Mr. Chair, maybe you can correct me, but was this part of the conversation around some of the special funds that could be utilized to help cover clean and green that might be available through sanitation? Mr. Krikorian, do you recall that? Maybe I'm mixing them up.
Oh, well, you may not be at all, because I ask this question all the time, whether, our livability services, clean and green, all these sorts of other things ought not to be paid for out of, for example, the stormwater special fund or other things. And I think in many respects, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Oria, but in many respects, the answer to that is yes, they could be, but those special funds are already oversubscribed. Okay. And that may be the issue here. But is that, did I anticipate what you might say, Ms. Oria, on that?
That's correct, Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you.
But that should not stop us from searching and thinking creatively about this. And I'm going to speak to this more when I bring up the controller's office. But there are still a number of things that we need to do with regard to special funds, and particularly not so much these major special funds, but the idle special funds that might be able to help us through these difficult times as well. But I'll speak to that at greater length later. Anything else, Ms. Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mr. Ria.
So my question really had more to do with the shortfalls in that the Bureau of Sanitation is having with regard to the Livability Services Division. As I understand it, the budget, at least the council's actions on the budget, have not cut that program at all. And so it's unclear to me why there are shortfalls there.
The main shortfall that we have for the livability service is mostly for the vehicle rental, because for the SWRF vehicles, we used to get reimbursed through GCEP for the vehicle rentals because of the delay in purchasing the vehicles for the care and care plus activities, for the MICLA vehicles. And so we have to incur costs with regards to renting vehicles to perform the service that's required of us. And that's one of the reasons why we are asking that the $1.8 million that's in the GCP fund, if it's possible to transfer that to sanitation for vehicle rental. And if we get those funds, then we have adjusted our work programs that we think will be able to operate within budget, even including the reductions in our general fund budget. And but mostly that's the sticking point for us is the 1.8.
Okay. And so can you explain a little bit more why what vehicle rentals are you talking about that are outside of the current budgeted appropriation for these purposes?
These are, because we're supposed to, those, let's say Vector trucks that we were supposed to, they were previously budgeted in the MICLA vehicle, but because of the delay in the purchases, and also, again, with the reduction in our budget, we have the drivers and the maintenance laborers that have to go out in the care and care plus teams. need to rent vehicles because they're not going to have they're not going to be able to do their cleanups or their pickups.
But why not? Livability services was not cut. So why is it that, first of all, there's been a delay in purchasing the vehicles that would avoid rental? And second, why are these rentals taking place beyond the four corners of the budgeted appropriation for this program? And this is, I ask these questions, you know, and it's not the first time I've asked almost the same questions of sanitation about overspending in livability services. So why has there been a delay in purchasing vehicles, if that's the case?
The delay in purchasing the vehicles is mainly from the GSD is the ones responsible for purchasing the vehicles. There's a delay in the specifications of the vehicles because sometimes modifications are required. And also the fact that I believe the FSR kind of stated also that they were delaying the MICLA vehicle purchases.
Okay. What vehicles specifically are we talking about here?
I'll have to get back to you on that one because I don't have the current list with me.
Let's do that because, you know, especially given the fact that, you know, we're talking about, the council is talking about making changes, or there have been proposals to change CARE and CARE Plus deployment. We're talking about reductions there in order to resolve the budget deficit. Other parts of the council, we're talking about expanding those programs. So where we land on all of that is going to be significantly impacted by whether or not we can count on these assumptions we're making about the budget for livability services. And if there's a way that we can reduce rental costs by making MICLA purchases, to me, we should be doing that all day long. And I'm not clear on why that hasn't happened. So let's put a pin in that for now and expect that we'll come back and have further discussion about that between now and our next meeting.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for sanitation, members? Mr. De Leon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm not quite sure if the question was asked. I was attending to some other budgetary issues, but can you please explain the impacts of the reductions in the CARE and CARE Plus crews? And was that part of the previously approved LASSON budget cuts?
That's correct. It's the 3% cut that was required out of all the departments. So our general fund budget was cut by 3%. And
do we know how the crews will be deployed now, and where we will see services that suffer greatly? And I say this to give this some context because, as folks know, I have a skid row, so I have a lot of challenges, and I want to see where more or less, you know, crews are now going to be deployed, and how the services will be set back.
I believe sanitation will be submitting a plan or that with regards to the changes because of the reduction. We've had a bit of a difficulty, again, because of the COVID situation, where we're kind of short-staffed with regards to our refuse collection truck operators, since they are considered our frontline workers, and a lot of them have contracted COVID, unfortunately. So it kind of changes, you know, the number of teams that we can send out, and also it's affecting our overtime usage because we are required to, you know, provide these services. But And then also with regards to, we've had a lot of increase in tonnage also that we've collected. And so that's a bit of an issue with regards to deployment with regard to teams, because we're burning out the employees.
No, Ms. Odia, thank you. And I can imagine, undoubtedly, I've spoken with numerous sanitation workers. They've done an excellent job. And a lot of them are overloaded, especially in a district such as mine. Through the chair, I'd like to see if we can get a report back from LAS and how these cuts will affect response times and services citywide.
I'm sorry, did you say a report back from LASA?
I'm sorry, not LASA, from LASA, LA Sanitation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
okay.
LASA, yeah. LASA, LASA, and all that. Should be vernacular. I apologize.
Yeah.
Still learning acronyms.
I'm learning it's a new language. I am an English as a second language learner, so I'm learning this language, which is a different language altogether, the new vernacular. But a report back from LASA on how these cuts will affect response times and services citywide.
And you're going to have to learn yet another language, the city's language of acronyms. So
yes, the whole acronym alphabet soup here, without a doubt.
Okay, yes, we can certainly ask that sanitation bring back that impacts report when we come back as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Mr. Price, for sanitation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to also express my concerns about these cuts. I look forward to the report back for the reasons that you and Councilmember De Leon suggested. We just need to get the real number so we can figure out where the services are going to go. So I look forward to receiving the report back also.
Thank you. And as part of that as well, just let's make sure that we have GSD's report on these vehicle purchases as well, because I am confused about why we're in this situation. And I think I'd like to hear both from sanitation and GSD on cost reductions that might be realized by expediting vehicles purchases instead of continuing this rental. Okay, anything else for sanitation members? Ms. Mowry, did you want to add a comment in, or were you just making yourself available for questions?
I just wrapped up with the trial I was testifying in today and came in, but I'll follow up with our staff and get our responses back to you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Okay, next let's go to the Office of the Controller, please. And
so Krista Binder here with the Controller's Office. And
hi, Ms. Binder, welcome.
Thank you. Also with me today is Matt Crawford. I know you had some questions about the special funds. And also Shane Min with our office.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. Start with the easy part for Mr. Crawford, because Mr. Crawford and my office have been working on this issue for, I guess, like 6 years now, something like that. And at some point soon, we are going to land the plane and bring some closure to the ability to utilize particularly idle special funds. And I don't want to try to do that in the context of this meeting, but I do know that we have another report that will be coming up that will be heard by this committee. The Controller's Office has actually done a very detailed work product on special funds that allows us to really look carefully at which ones are just sitting idle, and that's not too many, and which ones are probably, still considered by somebody in the city, whether a council office or a department or something else, to be much needed funds for a future project. And we have to just start sussing those out and determining which is which. And I think the way we do that is by hearing it in this committee. And if people, have a case to be made, then they need to make it. And then the CAO's report before us mentioned a little bit of not a conflict, but perhaps a disagreement with the strategic approach proposed by the controller, which is to potentially borrow against some of these special funds, an approach with which I agree. And I think that is something we should look at. At the same time, I think we need to really drill down account by account with what can be escheated and when, and get that done. And take that, idle money as quickly as we can, wherever it's legally permissible to do so. And so I really need the Office of the Controller and the Office of the City Attorney and this committee to come to finality with that, because this can't be something that we talk about every year and don't finish. We have to finish this. So escheatment needs to be done. And in my view, borrowing against the special funds that we're not going to escheat, I know it's not great policy, but it's also not great policy to borrow out there on the marketplace either to go through to cover our operating costs. So I would much rather we borrow from idle special funds than borrow in the financial marketplace. So those are my general thoughts. We don't really need to resolve anything, I think, in terms of this report, because we are going to have a much more detailed report on that point coming up. But I just wanted to kind of signal that that's where I would like to see us go. Also, with regard to the Controller's Office, so thank you, Mr. Crawford. Didn't really need to take up your time with that. Also, with regard to the Controller's Office, there's this issue that this committee stepped up to protect the Controller's Office's accounting positions, the $190,000 in accounting positions last time. We continued it forward until the end of January for the accounting assistance program. And the Controller's Office, I would like to offer you an opportunity to comment on where we are with that, and then I'd ask for the CAO to comment on this as well. And in particular, with regard to the CAO, I would like to better understand how this realizes general fund savings if we are proposing to instead decentralize this accounting function into the client departments. It seems to me that would end up creating inefficiencies which might actually cost more and wouldn't realize any savings. So I just need to kind of understand that better. So why don't we start first with the controller's position on this and then go to the CIO.
Sure. So as you know, we were asked to report back on how to offset the $190,000, which is the remaining reduction from our 3% cut. So we identified two potential places, which is reimbursements from departments for this program. And then we are anticipating another $100,000 in additional revenue from our e-payables program. This is a program that we implemented last fiscal year. And it's basically allowing vendors to get paid with credit card. And when that happens, we get a rebate back on that. We're also anticipating that revenue to be $100,000 higher next year. So that was our approach to offsetting the reductions. We hadn't heard, we only found out in the FSR that wasn't an acceptable option for us. And so we're back here on the, back to where we were before. We don't have additional funds anywhere in our budget. Our expense accounts and contractual services, we took those cuts already. Our budget was cut 18% year over year. So we felt that this would have worked. It didn't work. We feel strongly about the program. As you know, it was created after ERIP, when numerous accounting professionals retired. We then created a bench of employees, which we got exemptions for at sort of at the beginning of the fiscal year. So when departments needed them, we didn't have to go through the very challenging process of individual exemptions for these individuals. We're running into that problem again with SIP. We've lost 22 accounting professionals already. I think we're going to lose 65 to SIP. So I could see us wanting to have that bench of people again on a list already exempted, that if a department needs it, that we can just easily employ that person and get them to where they're needed. So that's...
And so can I just ask you on that point, Ms. Binder, because I have to admit I don't understand enough of how these folks are deployed. If it's a bench of mostly retired former controller's office accountants or other accountants for the city that have retired and now they're on a bench and they're available on an as-needed basis. So where is, if there's a reduction in this amount, we would be utilizing them less often or not at all. Right? And so these are requests that the controller's office receives for as-needed use by departments, or are these used for auditing purposes?
They're used as needed by our office, but most of them are in departments. Right now, we have GSD, City Attorney, and Aging using them. Aging needed one desperately to handle the, I think it's called the Great Plates Senior Meal Delivery Service, to review the invoices and approve them. So we were able to get that individual for them for that program.
So if that cost were shifted onto the department, and the department had to make the decision of, well, we really do need an as-needed accountant, and so we can take one off this list, why would we not be able to do that and then simply have the department absorb that cost instead of your department?
We could do that. The only thing is that we administer the program, and I think from reading the CAO's report, they want to get rid of the program, and so shift the burden of hiring those people directly to the departments. The accounting assistance program it's a efficiency means to help move people quickly through the process. Then the departments would have to add as needed people to their DPOs. They would have to get single exemptions through the mayor's office or, in the hiring freeze. So that's kind of the challenge that would come at us.
Okay. CAO, who we have from CAO?
Councilmember,
Mr. Llewellyn.
I think I can respond to this. Again, as you point out, there may be administrative efficiencies in having a hiring source for these people. So for all I know, the controller needs a very modest amount of money to keep the list. But in fact, they currently pay for the services out of this fund instead of transferring it to the department. Our recommendation is the cost of the services should be decentralized, so that if Aging wants more accounting help, Aging pays for it. If our office wants more accounting help, we pay for it. And if there's a budget crunch, we have to make a decision whether to pay for more accounting services or more different kinds of services, as opposed to having this centralized service that is not charged against departments. If there's some kind of administrative cost to keep it in one place so they can be, pulled off a list easier, there might be. But we currently do that, for example, for economic consultants. We run the RFP, we have the list, and then departments can hire from it. If they need an economic consultant, if they need that service.
Okay. Are these costs reimbursed currently by departments to the controller's office?
Yes.
Accounting costs? Okay, so doesn't it have the same functional effect then? If the departments are paying for it anyway?
For the departments, but we have 4 in our office right now. So we're paying for those out of this $250,000 we get in the unappropriated balance. If the funding is swept, we lose those 4 people at the end of the next pay period. And we've estimated though the cost for those individuals at about $70,000 through the remainder of the fiscal year.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this then? can we provide that those positions in the controller's office remain, and that we look, as Mr. Llewellyn suggested, to maintaining the administration of the program within the controller's office, but decentralize the actual cost of the accountants to the departments? I think that makes sense. But your 4 positions that benefit the controller's office itself, I think there's something to be said for keeping those within your budget. So if we can do that, I would like to make that recommendation.
Thank you.
And I see no objection, so we'll go ahead and do that. And I think this actually more than pays for itself, honestly, because as we've seen time and again, inadequate accounting functions end up costing us a lot more in consequences than they do in actual payroll. So I'm going to stick with that recommendation. So if that's okay with everybody, we'll add that recommendation as well. Okay. So thank you, Ms. Binder. So that brings us next. Anybody else have anything for the controller? No? Okay. So that brings us to engineering. And I apologize for keeping engineering on the line for this long, because I just had what I think is a relatively easy question. Who do we have?
Good afternoon, Councilmember. This is Robert Katamatsu from the Bureau of Engineering.
How are you? And thank you for being with us. My question really had to do with capacity on fully reimbursed activities that you have with regard to telecoms. Because right now we're in a position in the city where everybody is working from home. There's massive demand on bandwidth. The telecoms are working to try to meet that demand. These are some of the richest companies in the world, and they can certainly afford to pay for as much engineering support from the Bureau of Engineering as need be. So I just want to make sure that there's capacity within engineering to be able to do the work necessary to meet those telecom permit needs, and you get those are all fully cost recovered activities. So I'd like to hear from you what you need in order to meet those needs, especially as I anticipate applications like that are going to continue to accelerate. Are you able to sustain your work on those fully cost recovered activities?
Yes, we have seen an increase in U-permit activity this year and last year, and we anticipate either the similar type increase going into next year. We do have staff working on that. As everybody else, we are impacted by the SIP reductions that are anticipated for next fiscal year, but we're currently working through the budget to continue some of those positions for next year to work on these fully cost-recovered activities, including U-permits.
So, I would really like to, I don't think it's necessary to change a recommendation for this report, but I would really like to urge the Bureau to develop a robust plan to be able to meet those needs, because these are economy stimulating projects, actually projects that the economy is dependent upon, and putting people to work in meeting those needs is going to be a major source of stimulus for our local economy for good jobs. And it's going to be just critical that engineering is able to accommodate and even expedite those kinds of applications on a fully cost recovered basis. So it would really be penny wise and pound foolish if we restricted hiring and we restricted your budget for those full cost recovery positions and end up hurting our economic growth just when we need to do it in a most robust way. So I would very much encourage you to bring those proposals back to the Budget and Finance Committee as well. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm sorry, did you want to comment on this?
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. I did have a question, and I presumed it was appropriate for BOE, and it was regarding the Willett settlement and our fulfillment of that obligation. Given that it was general fund, I wasn't clear on what was going to be able to be fulfilled as a result of the impact to BOE staffing and funding, and also how does that impact us with respect to compliance and fulfillment of that settlement?
Currently, we have staffing assigned to the sidewalk repair program, and we're doing our best to comply. Like I said earlier, we do have positions that are retiring for the remainder of the fiscal year. We are asking for some of the positions to be maintained for next fiscal year. At this point, it looks like we can make it, but we're uncertain as to what is going to be approved in next year's budget. So on a go-forward basis, we could probably report back to you as to what we can do next fiscal year. But we can have our deputy city engineer over that program get back to you on that issue.
Great. And then but to be clear, the funding has been preserved to actually do that work within BOE. You just have staffing issues?
Yes, about $30 million, but it's not just Bureau of Engineering that has staffing to deliver the sidewalk repair program. It's city. Yeah, there's multiple city agencies involved.
Right. I wanted to just confirm on those items, just because I know we have compliance issues that we need to make sure that we fulfill. That was a long time coming, so just want to make sure that's preserved. Thank you.
It was indeed, and just to clarify, fortunately, and this was an important part of the negotiation, that the settlement agreement does provide some year-to-year flexibility on this. So if there is a need to sort of bank some of those obligations and fulfill them in future years, we have some flexibility in doing that. And also what counts within the prescribed obligations will include, staff time within the Bureau of Engineering, as well as actual concrete in the ground. So I have no doubt we will continue to fulfill our obligations under that. So important point to stay on top of, that's for sure. Okay, anything else, members, for engineering? Then that, I think, comes to the end of our departmental questions. Any other comments or questions or suggestions, members, on the recommendations that are before us as we have revised them? Okay.
This is Jacob from the CEO. Would this be an appropriate time for me to read our technical correction to the record?
Oh, yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Wexler. Yeah.
Thank you. This is, we would like to amend recommendation number 1, attachment 2A in the CAO report, to remove a transfer of $130,000 from finances contractual services account to the UB unrealized revenue account, to authorize the controller to disencumber up to $130,000 in fiscal year 2019-20 encumbered balances for the modernization of the LA tax system within fund number /39, account number 003040, contractual services, and authorize the early reversion of up to $130,000 in uncommitted funds to the reserve fund, fund number 101. This is a technical correction in which we are just recognizing that this reduction is from prior year funds, whereas the way that we presented it in the report, we had treated it as though it was in current year funds. There's no substantive change to the recommendations in our report.
Okay, very good. And you kept careful notes on all of the other recommendations that we made throughout the course of this lengthy discussion, I gather, right?
Yes, sir. We have.
Okay, great. So then if there is no further discussion or objection, my recommendation would be that we approve the CAO's recommendations as amended by our discussion through the course of this agenda item. And let's go ahead and call the roll.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Blumenfield,
Blumenfield, aye.
De Leon,
Aye.
Rodriguez,
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
5 ayes. This item is approved as amended as stated by the committee members.
Very good. Thank you very much. Now that, am I correct that that concludes our open session items?
Yes, that is correct.
Very good. Then we can go ahead now and proceed into closed session.
Okay, one moment. ready.
All right, the Budget and Finance Committee is back now in open session. And we have concluded all of our closed session items. There being no other business before the committee, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.